We are live on Facebook once again. Welcome back to the live stream every Tuesday. I'm Scala, of course, joined once again by hip hop artist slash ELM Tokyo co-chair, Timid, Jay Carter. What's going on?
Good morning. Well, morning for me.
That's right. Time for
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Get canceled because we also have my longtime campaign manager and founding partner, Andrey Bystrov. He is Andrey Bystrov himself. Welcome, Andrey.
Hey, how are you, folks?
Good, good. Although I do have to say, I have COVID. So maybe I shouldn't be saying I'm doing well. Luckily, I'm not feeling too sick, but it is something that has happened and I've tried to stay on high alert. Unfortunately, it has hit me. I believe this is the first time I've had it. And so, you know, a couple weeks ago, Jay, I had said that the pandemic wasn't over, and this is proof. It's very much alive and well.
Yeah. And sorry that you know, but it sounds like you're faring pretty well. Even though I can hear a little in your voice, but
I am vaccinated, and thank God I am doing well. Hopefully, in the next few days, God willing, I'll be over this.
yeah. Do you lose your taste or any of that?
No, luckily I didn't. And weirdly, I didn't lose my energy. I had kind of like that sick feeling, like I can't really describe it. It wasn't really congested, but I felt sick, but I wasn't weak. Usually when you're sick, you're weak. I was kind of breaking off the walls this past week. It's kind of odd.
Or maybe you've identified a new subvariant of COVID, an energetic variant.
Yeah, right.
Dang. Well, you know,
It's rough. It's still rough out there. We just saw something that said cases are going up in New York with Omicron.
Hey, Jay, did we lose you?
It looks like Jay froze in time. I hope this isn't a new side effect of COVID. Jay has turned into a still image on our screen. Andrey, you're seeing what I'm seeing, right?
Yes, that is definitely Jay frozen in midair.
Jay is a zombie. All right. Well, this is the first. Hopefully we get Jay back. Let's see. I think he might be messaging me from the other world. That his computer went blank. Okay. Well, at least
let him restart.
So yeah. All right. So hopefully Jay will return. In the meantime, we do like to start off our live streams with something light. Of course, we're going to get into Russia and Ukraine and some heavier topics as we proceed here. But the light topic we have chosen for this week, because I know it's kind of right up your alley, is the Kanye documentary on Netflix. I know you saw all 3 parts. What are your thoughts?
I mean, so Kanye was a very big deal for, you know, people of my generation, and I'm sure for even younger hip hop fans. So watching a lot of the earlier footage is great. Having said that, knowing a lot of the kind of background information myself prior to watching this, I was curious at the kind of few omissions there. It was nice seeing my man Rhymefest. After watching, you know what's interesting? I think you would appreciate this. So after watching the third episode, I actually thought to myself, I would give up all of the discography after My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy for like a solid 3rd Rhymefest album. That would be dope. Yeah, no, I mean, like, I miss Rhymefest, man. Like, I'm sure he's creating like a lot of dope stuff. I was also surprised not to see like Mickey Halstead anywhere in the documentary. No, like Twag Gabs, a lot of the early Chicago cats. That would have been cool.
So that's interesting. You would trade all of Kanye's discography following My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy for another Rhymefest album?
For a really solid Rhymefest album, like akin to Blue Collar, yes, I would. Yes, I mean, for me personally,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like in an alternate dimension where this could possibly exist.
Okay. I'm not mad at that. I mean, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy might be my favorite Kanye album. I, of course, love College Dropout, Late Registration and Graduation. Those are the 4, though, right? I mean, aside from that, I can kind of do without them.
I love 808s, you know? And that's, by the way, that's another thing that was kind of omitted, right? From the documentary. It definitely showed the tremendous weight that his mother's loss had on him. but it didn't really showcase the fact that he also lost his fiance right at the same time. This his high school, college sweetheart, right? Somebody that was with him from his come up. And so, you know, I guess that could have been some of the traction that was originally around the Netflix documentary, where it wasn't getting released without some cuts and some edits. So maybe there were certain things that were around that.
It seemed a little disjointed because you did have the beginning of his career, not even the beginning of his career, but it's picked up at a time prior to him joining Rockefeller and working on that first album. And it was that when you saw the making of the first album, and then it kind of stopped. And the third episode was kind of all over the place to me. I mean, it didn't really follow that same trajectory. It was just like, these are my experiences with Kanye from that point on. I kind of fell out of touch with him. And over the years, I kind of saw him every once in a while. But it wasn't that.
Right. I mean, it's sped up. It's sped up. Though, I mean, look, man, Cootie's daughter is adorable. That was fine. I didn't mind him bringing himself a little bit into the documentary as well. Look, most of all, I hope he got paid. I hope he got paid really, really well from that 30 million or whatever from that Netflix money. You know what I mean? I hope a lot of that went to him. So.
Yeah, that's actually a point I wanted to discuss with you as well, because I know we were kind of musing over that. Like who would own that footage? Who got paid? We understood that $30 million was the price tag on this Netflix documentary, but obviously it was Cootie who took the footage. Did you own the footage? And I guess this kind of opens the door to some legal questions, but was Kanye paying him all along? Was it a work for hire? Because paid him,
and you know, and at some point, and at some point, potentially the record label and all that. You also, by the way, if you saw in like the some of the last footage of the recording albums in Wyoming and stuff, you still had Dame Dash over there and stuff. You know what I mean? You don't know who has any kind of ownership of any kind of videography or whatever.
True, but here's the point that I think also needs to be said. Even if, let's say, Kanye owned all of that footage because he commissioned the Cootie to take it, Cootie, I guess, made the documentary, so he would own the intellectual property of that work of art, right? So he still needs to be
unless he sold it early.
Documentary.
Unless he sold that.
Jay Ivy, I think, was listed as a producer too.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I mean, who knows? I don't know. I don't want to parse that money. All I'm saying is that I hope that Cootie made some scratch off that. You know what I mean?
Jay is back. Tim, we were just talking about who got that $30 million. Do we think that Kanye got most of it, or was Cootie paid?
Yeah, I don't know. I heard what you're talking about as far as like the intellectual property and stuff, but I mean, I would hope Cootie made a sizable amount. I mean, 30 million, there's a lot to go around. You know?
I'm sure he needs it more than Kanye does.
Yeah, go revamp Channel Zero for the new generation of Chicago rappers, and you know what I mean, artists that coming up.
Yeah, so I mean, I would imagine there was something that was agreeable for all of them for it to even come out, because you know, especially with as erratic as Kanye is and his status, he could have definitely blocked it from being released, I would imagine. So
yeah, we were actually mentioning the fact that there was potentiality, you know what I mean, that there was actually some of that earlier, right? He was trying not to release the footage unless Netflix cut some things. So
yeah.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, it was
about
big
all of
thing
the
you put
people
out
in there who would have to sign releases too. That's not easy to do. I mean, it's one thing like that. You're going around with a camera filming everybody you see in the year 2003. Now, 2022, you want to release this on Netflix? I mean, good luck tracking down some of these people. That sounds like a logistical nightmare as a lawyer, right?
Yeah. I mean, would that be all right though if they knew, like, because they had kind of somewhat of consent, because he said often like he's filming a documentary. Right,
and that would be the distinction. Did they consent to being filmed, or did they consent to appearing in a documentary? It's kind of an odd issue. Hey, Franny. It's an odd issue with maybe giving consent to appear in a documentary back in 2003, but did they expect for it to come out now on Netflix, on this platform, all these years later? I mean, it can get a little thorny.
Yeah. So, hey, I don't know.
But hey, I'm not complaining. I'm happy that this thing exists, right? Now, some of this footage we had seen over the years in bits and pieces, but never this comprehensively. And I actually did not know that Kanye had someone filming his every move back in the day. That was a surprise to me.
Right?
Really happy that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was really surprising. I thought it was a pretty good documentary. You know, a lot of interesting stuff.
You just wish it started a couple of years earlier.
Why?
I mean, like I said, man, then you would have had the Mickey Halstead, the Twan Gaps, Rhyme Fest years. You would have had a little bit more of that, the kind of early group stuff.
Go-getters.
Huh?
Right.
Go-getters.
Yeah, it would have been cool.
Yeah,
I don't like
yeah.
to see that.
No, he makes a good point because in the very beginning, he's already saying he's a platinum producer. So
Right.
it's kind of hard to root for him as someone coming from nothing because he already starts off the documentary at a pretty high spot. Now you do root for him trying to get on as a rapper, trying to make that transition from producer to rapper. But when it starts, he already is somebody, right?
Yeah, 40,
Right.
40, 50 down, 40, 50 grand a track. You know what I mean?
Right. He's
Yeah.
not exactly struggling like in the way you might expect someone to be struggling here.
Yeah, it would have
man,
been
that was
interesting.
great.
It would have been interesting to see more of how he got from just the dude in Chicago to making that beat for Jay. And because that's
Right.
kind of like you said, that's kind of how it started. Like, yeah, I got Jay under my belt. And it's like, okay, well, how did you get there? How did you
Right.
get to that?
Well, the first time I ever heard of him was, I believe, the Mad Rapper album. And I thought his name was Kane. I read it as Kane, but that's the first time I heard the name. Oh, he produced some of the tracks on there and he was an up and coming producer. But that was pre-Jay, that was with Derek Angelo and the Hitmakers.
All right. There was
Hitman.
watching how all of that played out later, like because we know now some of it makes it even funnier. Because I remember there was, and I think I sent you a message about this. There was a point in there where Kanye was listening to a beat. I guess he was in a car, and then Kweli was there, and he was playing his beat, and Kweli's like, "Yo, can I get that?" And Kanye's like, "Yeah, you get this." And like we know now that ends up being a Jay song.
Yep.
Like, yeah, what happened there? How did Kanye?
I do want to talk about the whole Raucous thing because that's interesting in hindsight. I know, Jay, you and I were talking about this. It kind of seems now that Kanye would have been a good fit for Raucous, but that's because we have the benefit of hindsight. I think after the College Dropout came out, he kind of bridged that gap to the point where we weren't even really talking about mainstream versus underground distinctions anymore. And of course, that was happening organically as it was with the internet and things like that. But kind of after that point, we were looking at music in a different way and it all seemed to come together. But prior to that, there was kind of a hard line between mainstream hip hop and underground hip hop. And Raucous was really trying to present itself as the alternative to the shiny suit of Bad Boy and the mainstream stuff. And we might not have the big budgets they do and the most expensive producers in the world, although we do have DJ Premier and hot producers, but we're going to give you the real authentic hip hop and we're going to do it in a great way that's going to be an alternative to what you see in the mainstream. So there was kind of that hard line there. And Kanye, I think, struggled. He kind of took elements from both, but it was a hard sell for him, I think, for Rockefeller and for Raucous for those reasons, because he was kind of in the middle of both.
Right. The question, I had two points out of that is one, if Kanye would have signed to Raucous, would Raucous still be around today? Or would Kanye even be the size of an artist that he is today?
I don't think Kanye would have been, well, if he remained on Raucous. I mean, because what if he just dropped one project to Raucous and then went on to Rockefeller? I mean, that could have happened also. But I guess
Right.
to answer this question as what if he only was on Raucous? And would Raucous have become a huge major mega label? Or I don't think so. I think that Kanye kind of would have fizzled out, maybe the same way like Slum Village or Dilated Peoples. Not that they don't do their numbers or whatever, they do well, but it wouldn't have been the mega star with that,
Right.
in my opinion.
I mean, they also wouldn't have had as much money to clear some of those samples.
Exactly.
That's a really good point.
They wouldn't have had the budget overall to make the record, to put it out, and to promote it. Now, it's a little bit of a misnomer. I think that Raucous was independent because they did have major label funding. Black on Both Sides went gold. They had big records, but it still wasn't, Def Jam. It wasn't on that level at the time, and that was a lot more money than Raucous was.
And Kweli also, he did dip into the mainstream with one or two songs and just never took.
Well, Just to Get By, which was produced by Kanye.
Right.
Like that was a crossover. And that's kind of what I was talking about with that blurring of the lines. Kanye really was doing that. And so some people say, well, he was kind of dipping his toe into the Raucous pool. He would have been a natural fit. But, people had a hard time seeing him as a rapper on the level of a Kweli or a Mos Def or a Pharoah Monch. Rawkus was trying to be that, you know, we're the lyrical guys, like we're really authentic MCs. Kanye was good, and I've said this also. Part of the college dropout's charm was that technically he wasn't that advanced, but you were cheering for him because he was the producer trying to make it as a rapper. He was like the little engine that could. You know what I mean? But from a technical standpoint, he really wasn't there. I mean, he was running out of breath a lot, punching in all over the place. Lyrically, he wasn't that advanced. I know we talk about he had the Rhyme Fest rhymes, which were great, but that's an issue in itself at the time. Having a ghostwriter wasn't something that you had if you were considered a great MC. Now the rules are a little bit different. But back then, that was like, that Rock was the keep it real label, right? That wasn't really keeping it real.
Yeah, I can see that. And speaking of that, keeping it real, and the Rawkus and the Kweli and all of that connection, because they really, Kweli and Mos Def, they really helped to champion Kanye in those early days and helped him put him on stages and stuff. Did you see when he was on Drink Champs and Kanye said, "Oh, I just want to apologize to the Backpackers because, you know, I pretended like I was one of y'all. Nah, really, I'm from the streets and I just used y'all to get on." And like he made it very clear, or he's saying now that he was faking it with the backpack type of style just because he wanted to get in, but that wasn't him. So would he have really been? I guess he still would have been a fit in Ruckus because he would have been perpetrating. But like, you know, like that's still
but I'll tell you this though. I think some of that was shining through, some of that faking the funk. Because Talib Kweli used to bring Kanye on stage with him back in those days. And the Kweli audience didn't really get Kanye. He tried, he had the backpack on. He tried to like, I'm one of y'all. But he was rapping about things that didn't really mesh with the raucous aesthetic. They just didn't. Kweli was the story. Kanye would have a line like, you know, I got an all-white outfit with a white girl on my arm. And he thought that was cool. The crowd wasn't buying that. That wasn't what the raucous fans wanted to hear. You know?
Right. Well, Kweli's audience is the pro-black and whatnot. He spoke about that in a Vlad TV interview, and he mentioned that exact line, and he was just like, you know, they weren't feeling him at first, but we kept pushing him, you know, out there because we, you know, thought he was could be something. And
and the only verse people knew of his was on the Jay-Z album. And again, it's funny, like now, like you don't really appreciate the division, right? But back then, like if you were rapping on a Jay-Z album, you weren't considered at home to much of that raucous crowd. They took pride in being alternative. Like it's like people make a joke now, like I liked them better when they were underground and that kind of stuff. People mock it nowadays, but that was a real thing. The backpacker thing was like we're anti-mainstream.
Right.
You know.
So I think we got to mention, we can't let this go by. We got to mention in any discussion about this documentary is how much of a prick Kanye's dentist was. God dang. That dude.
Wait, what? What are you talking about? That is crazy. What a crazy take.
This was a prick. What are you talking about?
What do you mean, man? He was trying to get some footage while like this dude is trying to keep everything fucking sterile.
Yeah, but after, even he allowed him to film, but just the way he was talking with Kanye and about what was happening, like his attitude was just horrible. Like Jesus Christ.
I guess I missed that part of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, not the filming part, that initial part where he's like, wait, what are you bringing a camera in here for? I get that. But afterwards, just their dialogue afterwards, he was just, and even if you go to like Twitter, and I know, you know, you can't gauge always, but people were trending like, Jesus Christ, this has got to be the worst dentist in history. His bedside manner is horrible.
I'm assuming this guy lost a lot of clients.
Being in his face when he was trying to do some major surgery on the guy's mouth.
No, even in the consultation moments, it was just his way of speaking was just quite rude. Just like, yeah.
Wait, Tim, did you see the slop post, Slop Funk Dust on Kanye on the documentary?
What did he say?
I think he said it was one of his smart ass posts, but I think he said something like he saw it and he was inspired to go make the worst beat he ever made in his life on FL Studio.
Yeah, I saw that.
I bring it up because that was actually the A&R, shout out to Slop, if you're watching. That was the A&R that signed me to Rawkus a couple of years after that. The A&R, though, that was in a documentary was a different guy. He was actually in favor of Kanye, but the heads weren't. But I think it kind of goes to show you that attitude that you kind of see around Kanye. And to me, it's that whole mainstream thing. But also, like I was saying, I do think there's an element of him just not really being technically that advanced. Even today, I mean, I don't know, Jay, do you disagree with this? I don't think he's one of the best pure rappers in the world. I think he makes great music, and he has made great music, but
So I actually hold on a second. Then there's a distinction there. But sorry, I'm just responding to some of my canvassers being out there. But I think that there is a distinction between dense lyricism or some sort of deep messages in lyrics.
sure.
But in terms of purity, I think he is quite genuine on his rhymes, and that's why people appreciate it. I think that there is a certain, and particularly genuineness, right? A certain authenticity, right? A certain, a certain seeming transparency between what's inside and what he's putting out there that you can appreciate, even if certain things are obvious facades. The I'm a god and Jesus kind of stuff around. You know what I mean?
What about just in terms of technical MC ability and lyricism?
Hold on a second, man. I'm coming at this from a writer's standpoint. The complexity of poetry and lyrics does not necessarily make them great or kind of less so. It's really about playing around with form, and I think he plays around with structure. He plays around with form. He plays around with meter, and I think that adds to his greatness and to his appeal. I think there's the certain rawness of the material makes it great and rise above, right? There's a difference between
on the level of like
I'm saying there's a difference between a Kandinsky and like a Basquiat. You know what I mean? Like if you're talking about form and structure and stuff, you know what I mean? So it's.
But again, as a lyricist, as a technical MC, is he on the level of
I can let you speak to that, man. I can talk about from a writer's perspective and stuff. Look, man, there's some verses of Kanye's that are dope as fuck. You know what I mean? There's some that are less so. I almost paused myself.
No, I get what Andrey is saying. There's a lot of form to how Kanye rhymes, and it's always has been. And I mean, is he as technical as, like you said, someone like a Nas or an M or something like that? No, but I think it's it depends on what you're looking for. He does play around with different types of forms and cadences and just his delivery and whatnot.
To me, no, I was going to say, I think that the whole is often greater than the sum of its parts with him. And
right.
I think it comes out really good a lot of the time. Sometimes I don't like it, but that's what makes a great artist too, that you're able to try different things, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think he's really good at being an artist and creating good music with a lot of people's help sometimes. I just don't think if you're going to look at strict technical emceeing, he's an elite. I think he's good. I think he's certainly above average, but I don't think he's like a 9 or a 10 out of 10 on that level. I wouldn't put him up there with a Nas or a Jay-Z or an Eminem or a Big L or a Mos Def,
All right. Mos Def is a beast. Pharoah Monch is a beast. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, it's an interesting discussion. I think we've maybe talked about it enough.
Yeah. But it was a good documentary,
Yeah.
I'm not there to listen to Donda 2 yet, so.
Yeah. So let's move on to more, I guess, serious topics. We named a few, of course, Russia and Ukraine being a big one. Andrey, I wanted to get your take on this because you were born in Russia, right?
So I was born in the Soviet Union. When I left, it was Leningrad. When I came back, it was St. Petersburg. But so my grandfather, who raised me along with my grandmother, he was born in a Ukrainian shtetl, and it was the first day of the Ukrainian crisis that his little village where he was born and stuff, and he had to flee, the Germans, the Cossacks, and a bunch of the anti-Semites in the Soviet kind of influence and stuff, and now it's taken over by the Russians, and I think that I share kind of my family's thoughts on this and my own. It's just fuck Putin, fuck the Russians in this. This is an absolute travesty.
I appreciate the sentiment. People are comparing this to Hitler invading Poland. Do you think it's on that level?
No, look, it's not on that. From Putin's perspective, I think he's looking at it like this. What are you guys going to really do about it? he's watching what's been happening with China for the last 40 years. They took Tibet. They flew planes over Taiwan. They do it at any given point. They've now are perpetuating genocide. They've killed the Falun Gong, the Uyghurs. Most of the world doesn't really do anything because of how much commerce is interwoven in our foreign policy, particularly in regards to China, and now with Disney and everything else, right? It's interwoven in culture too. Now, so Russia thinks, hey, listen, we're going to take back some of the former Soviet satellites. We're going to take back some of these countries that are nearing us, and they're going to try to test us. And it's really going to be very interesting to see how much the world pressure is not going to have on Russia, but China and its relationship with Russia.
Right.
Because that's their last kind of economic stronghold in terms of a financial partner. And that's going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah. People have said, giving excuse for reason why they say Putin was pushed to this because of the attempt of getting Ukraine into NATO, because they didn't want NATO on Russian borders, even though, there's already 4 countries on Russia's border that are in NATO. Any thoughts on that idea there? Like, is that a reason to go into it, or like, does Ukraine not have
look,
autonomy to decide for themselves?
No, look, not at all, right? So NATO is an interesting concept. There are folks, and I've been hearing, pundits talk about the fact that, hey, listen, NATO was supposed to deal with the Soviet Union. There's no more Soviet Union. Like, why is that still exist when it's the Russian Federation now? Well, realistically, it's a lot of former Soviet satellites that don't want to have anything to do with the tyrannical control of Vladimir Putin, and they don't want to have autocratic puppet governments that are placed there by the Kremlin. And so they are the ones that are kind of fueling and energizing the existence of NATO. It's not Western powers that are trying to keep it in existence. In fact, it's a really shitty political talking point in American politics. Most Americans don't really support NATO prior to this, conflict. And so, or a lot of Americans just don't know what it is, right? So it's never been a popular thing, and it's always been kind of a losing political thing within the United States, but it's important for those nations, particularly for these reasons.
Right.
What is the sentiment like over in Japan about this? In America, it seems like people are pretty unified against Russia's action here, and this is like maybe the first issue that's really united all sides of the political aisle to a certain extent.
Unless you're a Tucker Carlson fan, though.
Well, but in Japan, how are people reacting?
Well, I haven't really seen much. I mean, from the people that I've talked to, they more empathize with Ukraine, and don't see why Russia would take these actions, or don't think they're good actions to take. So I think there's a company here, and I can't remember the name. It's one of pretty major companies was being kind of criticized for not going along with everyone else and pulling out of financial things with Russia. But I know Japan is implementing a few sanctions against Russia as well, but I don't know how strong those are.
See, the issue also with sanctions is people on the ground tend to be affected by them sometimes more than the governments that they're intended to.
Correct.
Right? So how do we see that playing out? How do we see our lives here in America or even in Japan being affected by this?
Well, as I mentioned before, I remember talking about friends in Denmark, and a lot of those European countries get a lot of oil from, got a lot of energy from Russia, and Denmark's one of them. And since they're having the sanctions, some of the people are having to cut back. I would imagine that's going to be happening all over Europe. The U.S. not so much. I think, Andrey, you said that we mentioned that U.S. has stopped importing oil, but it's only 1% that we get from Russia, so it's not going to be any kind of effect in the U.S. So, but for countries that use more, it'd be even bigger, I would imagine.
Sure.
Questions?
Right.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that. I mean, it's a powerful gesture in and of itself. I do think, for us to kind of make this a marked line, saying that at no point will we be exporting any oil nor any ships that are utilizing Russian oil can dock in the United States. There's, there are a lot of things that come with that, right? And the fact that it's, that it's connected and we've kind of synergized with other countries to do the same is going to be very, very interesting. And
Yeah.
I do want to, though, say that with everything that's going to be happening, and of course our hearts go out to the Ukrainian people, but people do need to remember that there are a lot of good Russians out there that are protesting in the streets and stuff, and there are a lot of poor Russians that have nothing to do with this war. They're going to just starve to death now that the economy there is going to plummet, and it's a tragedy all around. You know what I mean? It's very, very sad.
Absolutely.
How do
Yeah,
you see
seeing
it
that
playing
footage.
out? What is the end game here?
I mean, it's not going to play out well for anybody that's expecting a happy ending. It won't happen unless somebody close to Putin ends up killing him tomorrow or within next month. I don't see any of these things really happening. I see that at some point Russia will take Kiev, and at some point they will try to install a puppet government. And Zelensky will probably at some point will have to flee the country. And it's going to be very, very sad the next month of events. And I see a lot more people dying, a lot more innocent civilians dying. Yeah.
Do you think that the American government thus far has been handling it well?
I don't think that there's that much that can be done. I think that we need to. The thing that really annoys me is that our last tactic is to hurt the actual people that are involved, right? Like we are specifically targeting the bank accounts of a lot of oligarchs that are in Putin's inner circle. We are not, in fact, targeting Putin directly, and that seems to be something that I don't like. I understand that it's the last strategy in diplomacy, but at this point, why not? The man has probably $250 billion in personal assets squirreled away and hidden amongst different counterparts. Start actually hurting his bottom line. Start hurting him. That's about it.
It's a conscious decision to spare him at this point.
No, I think what's the point at this juncture? Why not?
But do you think they're not targeting him consciously? Like
They are. They're not targeting him consciously. They're saying that is the last kind of the last thing that they can do, and I don't think so. I think they should be doing it now. I think there's plenty of money that you can start taking away.
Yeah. Now, I agree with you. I think I mean at some point Russia is going to take Kiev, and I don't see Ukraine coming out on top of this. I mean, you'd hope it would end, but I think they're going to. But then that also is going to lead to resistance fighting even more once they do take it, because people are going to want to take it back.
No, I mean, yeah, correct. There's no way you can hold it with the people this willing to fight for their homeland and their culture and their existence. It's just, but again, you've seen what this kind of takeover, how it looks when you have people who really want to fight back, but it becomes just a really kind of a terror inside the kind of walls, man. You know what I mean? Like killing off any kind of cultural authorities, and all of this type of stuff. You can look at how the communists held the Czech Republic, and I think it's going to be closer to that than anything else.
Now, does this break Russia though? Like you got a lot of these financial places around the world are cutting off ties. MasterCard and Visa, I believe, also cut off ties, and all these other countries have got sanctions. Like, does this ruin Russia financially? Because that's a lot.
It's funny. All these companies are pulling out. Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and Starbucks said they're going to just pause services. They're going to pause.
Right.
Click that pause button.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I do have a wonder, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Belarus has allowed Russia to launch troops from there. And so
Right.
how much do we hold, do people hold Belarus for being complicit in some
I mean,
ways?
they're fully complicit.
But I haven't seen people talking about sanctions or anything against Belarus unless I'm missing anything. Should
I
there
mean,
be?
I'm assuming that it's part of the package, but then again, that's an assumption. Who knows? I
don't think that has the same economic or any kind of impact either. I mean, that might be part of it, but obviously that wouldn't be the headline, right? It's not nearly the same as targeting Russia.
Right. But I mean, it could give, if people were sanctioning Belarus, and they're a much smaller country, much smaller economy, that could hurt them a little bit more and make them possibly rethink their support of what's going on, and at least take like a neutral stance, like, okay, look, we can't afford this. Putin, you're gonna have to figure something else out or whatever.
Do we anticipate any kind of military response from the rest of the world? Obviously, most Americans don't want to get involved, and I don't think we're headed that way. But is any European country going to do anything? And what's happening?
So you have to remember. So in Belarus, you have Alexander Lukashenko, who's the president, who has quite literally been the president since the country became an autonomous state in 1994.
Mm.
So at that given juncture, I don't think he really cares, because look, you also have to understand both the positions of like Lukashenko and Vladimir Putin. Their only ways that they leave is to go to prison momentarily until they are killed. That is it. That's the retirement package. At some point, at some given juncture, Vladimir Putin will be killed within his own country. Because at some point, you know what I mean? Like, you just can't hold on to that power. It could happen at any given juncture. It's like that super volcano underneath Yellowstone National Park, right? Like, it could go off in a week. It could happen in 10,000 years. But at some point, it's going off. With Vladimir Putin, thankfully, the timelines are a little bit shorter than, the Yellowstone super volcano.
There was an article in City and State talking about how New York's economy is comparable to Russia's economy, and New York itself, as a state, could do a lot of economic damage to Russia. I found that interesting, just kind of put things in perspective, and also how that affects us. I mean, it's New York is really at the forefront of American economics, it's the economic engine of our country, and so we are perhaps even more invested in this than other parts of the country might be.
Sure.
Mm. Yeah. Now, do you have any family or connection in Ukraine?
So so I still have family in Ukraine and in Russia, and at this point, all of that is very, very difficult, and even with folks that are in Russia, you're not able to speak about the war or anything else of that sort. Most calls are getting cut, and everything is being listened to. So it's just all it is very, very difficult in terms of communications or anything else.
Yeah. That's
We're going to keep them in our thoughts and prayers and hope for the best. I mean, it really is terrible to be in a position like this because we feel helpless. I mean, I think a lot of people would like to be able to do more, say more, and make more of an impact on this, but we're kind of like watching helplessly and with fear, quite frankly. It's a terrible situation.
yeah, and the thing that you would think, and I think a lot of people assume that in this day and age, this modern day and age, that we wouldn't be seeing a country, like the world wouldn't allow a country to just invade another country and take it. Like, you would think in this modern day that wouldn't be allowed, with all the different coalitions and all the different powers and all this, that someone would be like, okay, hey, you can't do that, stop. But I mean, we've seen Russia do it with Crimea. Now they're going there. So the question then becomes.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, but this continues to happen. I mean, like I said, China with Tibet, right? You have Russia with Georgia. You know what I
Right.
mean? You have, so these things are continuous and constant. You know what I mean? We just give ourselves a long enough time to kind of forget about the last conflict, and that's what, you know, a lot of these tyrannical leaders kind of expect, that at some point history will wait them out.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, and
And,
our short attention span, and
and
you know.
I'm sure China is sitting over there and like, well, hey, if the world's not going to do anything, we can go ahead and get Taiwan like we wanted. And
They
so,
flew military planes over Taiwan on the first day of the Ukrainian invasion. That's right.
yeah. I think that's another thing that people are, you know, some people are looking at, especially if I were in Taiwan, that would be a real concern right now.
No, I mean, I've been talking about this for the last decade or so. When people talk about foreign policy, you know what I mean. Vladimir Putin in Russia is our biggest enemy and biggest threat to the world in the short term. But Xi Jinping in China is the biggest threat to the world in the long term. So, and that's really what you're going to have to take a look at. And unfortunately, there's really nothing you're going to ever be able to do with China at this point. So, you know, good luck, folks.
It's an interesting.
Now, Jay, I sent you something in the email before because apparently this whole Facebook action where they're trying to take greater precautions on certain accounts comes from fear that Russia is going to hack the 2022 midterms. And so they're trying to provide extra layers of security on accounts that they've identified as being, I don't know, I think they use the words influential or having the potential to reach a large audience. And I think they've also specified community leaders and people in politics. And so I got this email, I forwarded it to you. I thought it was a hack. I actually thought it in itself was an attempt to hack me because it came from facebookmail.com. I was like, click here to add security to your account. But then I was researching it further, and apparently it's a legitimate thing that Facebook is doing, that they're trying to add these extra layers to certain people's accounts because they're afraid of hacking from Russia specifically.
Well, Russia has been, through this conflict, they've stepped up their cyber efforts as well. Like even people were calling it out. I saw on Twitter, people were calling it out because there were a bunch of accounts that were posting the exact same thing, very pro-Russia messages about this conflict. And the messages were pretty much identical, and they were spread across like all these different Twitter accounts that were basically bot accounts. And, you know, and it started to trend. So you had these positive messages for Russia about this conflict that started to trend because of all this stuff is going on. So, you know, I'm sure that, you know, on other platforms, they're, you know, using other tactics as well, because they also have to not just, I mean, they're you know, in the conflict militarily, but they're losing the war in the media and the minds and the people around the world. So they've got to combat that. And social media is going to be one of the ways that
and that's interesting because we talk about how Russia or operatives in Russia were instrumental in causing a lot of division in the United States, especially leading up to the 2016 election. Now, I don't know if you call it ironic or what, but because of this conflict, you're seeing some of that division erode. Of course, we're still very divided as a people. Let's not pretend that we're not, but at least on this one issue, people are starting to come together. And again, I haven't seen that in a long time. People on both sides of the aisle agreeing on something, right? And it seems like they're unified to the extent that they're against Russia in this particular conflict. So that's got to be a cause of concern for them if their intent is to keep us divided.
Right. I will say this. Can I play the cynic for a quick second?
Sure.
So like war is good for the GOP to distract from the buffoonery that is Donald Trump leading their party. And war is good for the DNC to kind of boost up potentially Biden's ratings before the midterm and make people forget that, you know, Build It Back hasn't been a humongous success. And the Voting Rights Act didn't pass, you know, so just saying, you know what I mean? Like it's a good time to unify behind a war.
No, I think there's something to that historically people in power do well when there is war, unfortunately, but we've seen it happen over and over again. Look what happened in 2004 with Bush.
No, I'm just, look, I'm just hoping that if this is going to be a long, long thing, right, that it's gonna, that if this is still going on after the midterms, that I'm hoping that either party doesn't forget about it.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty legitimate question. At what point does the the minds of the populace look for the next thing, to where this has gone on so long that it's just like, okay, it becomes relegated to side news.
I'm just saying, man, Donda 2 can be amazing and people forget about the war entirely.
It's out now. I don't think it's getting that, but
I see people making posts on social media like, they had us talking about COVID all day long and now it's World War III. It's always something, so people are very, very cynical in the way they look at these things now. So,
yeah, and it's it's the using an old black sheep phrase, it's the flavor of the month. How, like I said, how long before the social media minds or whatever move on to the next big thing that happens? I mean, I know even people take up these types of interests and these fights, because it's what's happening in the now, without the realization or the understanding fully that it's a long-term sort of fight progress. And it's the same thing with when George Floyd was killed. There was, everybody wanted to do something in the BLM type of movement and into the police brutality type of movement. Now people are just like, it's back to what it was before. It's hard to get people to participate or to talk about something because it's not a thing that can be fixed now. It's something that is a sustained effort, and it takes time, it takes effort, it takes participation. And so, this war is not going to be something that resolves. Even, Putin takes Kiev, like we said, there's going to be people still trying to fight for their country and people still going to be dying, and attention from the world might be the third story. It might not be the first story anymore. And it might be the fourth story after that, and
Right.
well, on that point, Timid, one thing that we don't see as high up in the news anymore is the president's Supreme Court pick. You would think it would be a major story, and it's kind of fallen by the wayside. But we did want to discuss that a little bit, namely the strategy behind announcing in advance that he was going to choose a Black woman. Do we agree with that particular approach?
For me personally, I don't like that he announced that it's going to be a Black woman. Not that it shouldn't, that he, a Black woman should be excluded. I think if she's a great pick, he should definitely choose that. And it seems like she is a very good pick. But to say specifically, I'm only going to choose a Black woman, I have an issue with that. I think he shouldn't have announced it. If he was going to do it, then go ahead and do it. Just, this is my pick, but by saying this is what I'm going to choose, I'm only going to choose a Black woman, it doesn't really sit well. It also kind of feels like she's a token to that degree, or at least it sounds that way. And I don't think her qualifications warrant that her being a token. Like, she's qualified for what the position and whatnot, but I don't think it's something, that should have been announced that way. It's just like when people say, I want a woman president. Well, I mean, I understand that there's these glass ceilings and these things that haven't happened, but I mean, to say that just any woman will do, or any Black woman will do, like, there needs to be,
And that's not what's being said. I mean, obviously, President Biden didn't say any Black woman will do, but
no,
that's kind of the perception then. If you lead.
So yeah, I mean, look, I think I agree. I agree with Timid. What I would like to say is that I think that he shouldn't have announced that it was going to be a Black woman. I think he should have just announced a Black woman, and that would have been great, right? Having said that, I mean, look, I understand the way that this process works. The media always gets like your top 5 choices or whatever, so that they can parse them out and blah blah blah. So I do understand that they had to kind of do something in terms of in terms of the way that they did it. But I look forward to a Supreme Court Justice Jackson. I think that's great.
absolutely.
Do you think it was an issue when Reagan said he wanted to pick a woman? He just focused obviously on the gender. Is it more of a problem when you bring the race into it, or was that problematic as well?
I still think just that, I don't know, to announce that it's going to be that is what I have an issue with, whether it's just the gender or the race. Like if he was going to Reagan was going to nominate a woman, he didn't have to say, I'm going to nominate a woman. He just a nominator, same with Biden. If he was going to nominate a black woman, just nominate her. Don't say, be like, yo, I have this justice that I'm nominating. This is who I'm putting forth. And nominate her on her merits, not on her merits of not on being a black woman specifically to fit this box. And so that was.
What if that was a promise that he made in order to secure the votes and the endorsements necessary for the votes in South Carolina? In other words, what if he had to make that promise, which resulted in him, of course, becoming the nominee and ultimately winning the general election? Do you think it was worth it to make that promise then?
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, I can see that, but he didn't have. My thing is, he didn't have to announce that, right?
Even if he made that promise, he probably could have just announced his pick and fulfilled the promise, right?
Right.
Yeah, that would have been fine. And I completely understand the importance of the black woman, especially in the Democratic vote. They've done a lot of heavy lifting, especially in these last couple of elections, and so that demographic, that group, is very important to the DNC, and yeah, those interests should be taken seriously. I didn't think it was necessary to say, I'm going to nominate a black woman. Just nominate the black woman. Just nominate her, and then
right. Well, I think also, because I think there are two sides to this. Like, number one is what is morally right, and number two, what is politically correct or what looks good. But that's important as well. I don't want to dismiss that as not being a valid concern.
Right.
You have to try to get people to support what you're doing. And I think that's a big part of what the Democrats face right now, is that they're not always good on messaging, and
Right.
they're divisive in their rhetoric. And I think maybe this kind of falls in that category. The reason why, in my opinion, we're seeing so much visceral opposition to this is because he said it was going to be a black woman in advance. But if he would have nominated her, I think that would have taken some, maybe not all, but I think at least some of that opposition away. We kind of would have taken that bullet out of the opposition's chamber a little bit, right?
Well, they would have still, if we're honest, they would have still, if he would have just done it, there would have been people saying, oh, he's doing it to appease this group. He's trying to be woke. And that would have come regardless. But
not as much.
I think doing it that way, if he would have just nominated her and then they come out with that response, then that highlights them, a failure with them and the way that they think, versus the way that he did it. Now they can point to and say, oh, now he's specifically picking because of this specific race, and that's not right. So they have a little bit more of a kind of legitimate argument against how he's done it. If they would have just come out, oh, he's trying to be woke. It's like, well, now you're making it up because you have no basis on that. You don't know, So, that was on my only issue with it. I don't have any issue with her, and I hope she wins. I think it's a good, a good pick. It's a good move for Biden and for the country, and all of that. But, yeah.
One last question on this. Do you think it was a mistake, or he shouldn't have announced that he was going to pick a woman for vice president?
I had the same reaction as this was like, if you're going to do it, that's great. And I think he said a woman, but I think he even said a black woman at that time as well. And I had the same reaction, like, just do it. Don't announce that it's going to be a black woman or a woman. Just, this is my vice president pick. This is who I'm going.
And people always like to make the point that it should be the most qualified person, but I don't think we disagree with that. It's just that there are oftentimes a lot of qualified people, and it's not right that oftentimes the person chosen is a white male. So, more diversity is a good thing, but it's all about optics and the way you do it as well.
That's what I think. And sure, the Supreme Court should reflect the diversity of the country. There are different things on the Supreme Court that are, leaning to one way, and so it's, her being on the Supreme Court will be a positive thing. But again, it's, how it was announced. That was my only kind of negative. I don't know if I want to say negative, just kind of just like,
yeah. All right. last topic, we wanted to get into something local. I know you found an article that they're raising crosswalks in New York City. What is this about?
Yeah, so that article came out yesterday, saying that I guess the mayor is proposing this initiative or going forward with this initiative with the Department of Transportation. They're going to raise crosswalks. I didn't see how high they're going to raise them, but apparently they're trying to curb accidents in the city, and they're going to raise crosswalks for about 100 different crosswalks a year is their plan.
We're starting with 4, I guess, as a pilot program of sorts. Do you have that article in front of you? Because there were some alarming things in the article. Number 1, let's see if I can pull it up here, but number 1 was that we had a staggering number of people killed by cars in New York City last year. I think the highest since 2013. And that kind of jumps out at us because the city implemented its Vision Zero plan under Mayor de Blasio a number of years back with the intention of reducing deaths, pedestrians dying at the hands of motor vehicles. And apparently it didn't work out the way we wanted it to last year. Since 2013, we've had our highest rate of people killed on the street. Of course, the question is, does raising the crosswalk fix that? I mean, you might look at it like a hefty expense here, and I don't know if you're getting what you want with it. I mean, is it going to act like a speed bump as well to slow cars down?
Yeah, in that article, it did say that, it kind of functions a little bit like that, but like how high are they raising it? I think, I think it sounds more like a waste of money, because one of the things it said it was be more visible, but
Pedestrians,
it's still on the ground. Well, I don't know if it's more visible pedestrians. I don't think the issue is that pedestrians don't see that there's a crosswalk. I mean, we clearly can see that. It's more the cars hitting the
If it's raised, I mean, this is what I was thinking of when I first read it. We have to see more about this, of course, but if they're maybe not paying attention, if they're looking at their phones or something, if they're stepping into the crosswalk, maybe if it's higher, they'll feel it more onto their feet. I don't know.
I think it's still, the car is still hitting them though. Like crosswalk, whether they're looking down or not.
Maybe if they were about to jaywalk, if there are cars coming, they realize they're in a crosswalk, now they go back to the sidewalk, no?
It would be incredible to me if they just raised the crosswalk lines, right? And people would just be stumbling all over and stuff, not paying attention.
Yeah, a late night after the bar or something.
That's right, yeah.
Now the street's not even level anymore.
That's right, yeah.
Well, these are the areas. These are the 4 areas that they've announced will be getting the first raised crosswalk. So I guess we'll see how it plays out and how it works for them. It's Elm Avenue and Coney Island Avenue in Brooklyn, 69th Place, Juniper Valley Road and 69th Street in Queens, Martha Street and Howard Avenue in Staten Island, and East 158th Street and Caldwell Avenue in the Bronx. So if you live around there, I guess you'll be experiencing the raised crosswalks sometime soon.
Oh, another article, by the way, I gotta find this, but apparently they just did a study of the most calls about loud sex noises throughout the city, and Queensboro ended up having the most calls out of any other one.
People complain. So these are like 311 calls?
Yeah. So apparently Queens was number 1, Manhattan was 2, then Bronx, then Kings County, and Staten Island coming in last.
It's kind of an odd stat to track, isn't it?
I mean,
it depends on how much is going down in Queens, I guess.
Yeah, apparently, but so I got to find and send this article to you, but apparently one of the most raucous ones, and the one specific person who made the most calls was somebody off Cross Bay.
Really?
Yeah. So I got to send it to you.
In our district?
Somebody in our district, yep.
Oh
Somebody in our district by like 17th Street or something.
I guess should Queens, if it's going down that much that it made an article because of people are making these calls, I mean, should Queens change its slogan for the type of borough they are?
Queens is for lovers, baby. Virginia's got nothing on us. Queens
apparently not.
Well, speaking of loud noise, there's a new state law that's going into effect requiring cop cars to have decibel readers in them so that they can whether modified vehicles and their mufflers are making too much noise. And there's also now a decibel.
Oh, I thought you were going in a completely different direction. I thought they were going to be like, cop cars are going to be going by, checking the decibels of the houses.
No, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we
Like
need
if you get a citation because you're making too much your sex noises are hitting the decibel meter, do you take that as pride?
You probably framed that ticket, right? Like, and put it in your house somewhere.
Yeah. Like, yeah. So yeah, I mean some of those mufflers, yeah, can get quite outrageous. Those motorcycles especially.
Right. And the law used to be if it made unnecessary or an excessive noise, which is very vague. And so a lot of people weren't ticketed for that because it's extremely subjective. So now there's an actual decibel limit in the law, and cops are required to have decibel readers in their cars. So this can be measured. Hopefully that does something about it, because people are, in all seriousness, are kept up all night from the noise of the loud mufflers going back and forth in many areas.
And it bothers my dog.
Oh, we can't have that.
No.
Not at all.
Can't have that at all. Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, you also want to wonder, like, what things can you limit and or
Dog
should
is
you
sleeping
limit?
now. See, if a loud car goes by, then she wakes up and it's a problem for everybody.
Makes up the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you, Timid, and you always have to kind of think about what are the limits of what you should be legislating, right?
Right.
You think that this is a serious issue and something that we
Right.
should measure. It shouldn't just be, do we think it sounds too loud for us tonight? I mean, it's, whose call is that? That should be an actual number that you can read.
And listen, I understand it. They can get so loud. Some of those motorcycles can get so loud where you can't even hear the person talking next to you. But yeah, I think there should be some kind of I'm sure there are some kind of guideline to what's it's acceptable or not.
Well, there are now. It's a
Yeah.
new state law.
Yeah. Yeah.
License if they perform these illegal modifications.
Right. Yeah.
Great discussion, everybody. Any closing thoughts? Hopefully we're still on the air next week. I know we had a potty mouth Andre, but it's all good.
I don't know. Not listening to Donda. I'm
This
good.
is the benefit of being on Facebook and not on TV or radio. We have that leeway here.
That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely appreciate Andre coming on and your thoughts, especially being close to what's happening to in Ukraine and in that area and having some of that history. I definitely appreciate
Absolutely.
hearing that. So
Well, thank you guys for having me. You guys are tremendous hosts. And I hope to come back on in the future.
Excellent. Thank you all. Have a great night. We'll see you next week.
peace.